A couple weeks ago, I started a sermon by saying, an old saying goes, when darkness falls, you can either curse the darkness or light a candle. There is a third option. You can embrace the darkness. The winter solstice is the darkest time of the year. It is the longest night. The ancients burned fire to help the light return. The Yule log is a sacred symbol of safety. The Mother Goddess awaits the return of the Sun King. Listen to these words from the Athens, Georgia area covenant of UU pagan site. In ancient times, people despaired the deepening passages of the sun. The air chilled, the plants and trees lost their leaves. Insects disappeared along with some kinds of animals. What was once vibrant with the song of birds and the scents of flowers and berries was now a desolate time of deathly cold. The goddess mourned the passage of the sun, her lover, as his power waned. She yearned for the time of his return in the never-ending cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Although winter is long, the spark of hope remains that the sun will return again to warm the cold earth. Born anew from the depths of darkness, we see that we too can find our rebirth if we follow the example of holly, mistletoe, and evergreen. Consider for a moment the opposite season, the summer solstice. Now, in midsummer, there are no ritualistic darknesses that people try to hold on to. During the longest day, there's no ritual to gather in a windowless room. There are no prayers to call for the return of darkness. This dark solstice, as our responsive reading said, consider that winter is something in and of itself, not just a gateway to spring. I ask you to not be seekers of light, to consider that dark is not evil and that the light is not good. There's no heroes in white hats and villains in black. Do not be afraid of the dark. Not all gloom is full of doom. If you do this, there will be no black marks made against you. Much of our language and culture equates the dark with evil. Recently, I have heard someone say that segregation is a stain on the pages of American history. And even that language suggests that what is darker doesn't belong on the page. But the relationship between light and dark is not antagonistic. They are cooperative. The black ink is what transforms the blank page into a history book. The blank page provides a place of rest for the flowing ink of our thoughts. Both night and day are part of the 24-hour cycle we call a day. The yin-yang symbol of Chinese religion was developed in part by measuring the shadow cast by a pole upon the ground and marking it as we move through the circle of the year. The shadow was longest into winter months and shortest in the summer. The light-colored area, which indicates more sunlight, is called yang. The dark color area that has less sunlight is called yin. Yang is like man, yin is like woman. Yang wouldn't grow without yin. Yin couldn't give birth without yang. Yin is born at summer solstice, and yang is born at winter solstice. So in both the ancient European and the ancient Chinese culture, the dark is seen as the female aspect. Now, in patriarchal societies, the dark would therefore be seen as lesser. And of course, in racist societies, dark is considered inferior. So the longest night tends to be celebrated only because the light is returning. But I want us to remain in the dark for a while. Now, among intellectuals, remaining in the dark is considered ignorance. I say remaining in the dark is the only way we can learn about the things we cannot see. It is a way to uncover secrets, even those that we keep from ourselves. Listen to these words from a website called Tending Sacred Circles. Darkness is on her face and over the surface of her waters. Seeds are resting in the depth of her womb. Animals are searching out their shelters. Darkness and cold is felt on bodies and souls. As the temperature continues dropping, feel the cold and see the great long darkness stretching before us. 'Tis time of hibernation, entering the darkness, entering the cave in ourselves. Entering the cave within ourselves. Have you ever wondered why most people close their eyes to pray? This self-imposed darkness takes us away from the material world. The psychologist Carl Jung describes the need to look at one's shadow self. Rebecca Egan writes, "The shadow is a psychological term introduced by the late Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. It is everything in us that is unconscious, repressed, undeveloped, and denied. These are the dark, rejected aspects of our being, as well as light. So there is a positive, undeveloped potential in the shadow that we don't know about, because anything that is unconscious, we don't know about." The shadow is an archetype. And what that means is that it's typical in the conscience of everyone. Everyone has a shadow. It's not something that one or two people have. We all have a shadow, and confrontation with the shadow is essential for self-awareness. We cannot learn about ourselves if we do not learn about our shadow. The first thing we have to do in order to begin to see our shadow sides is to take 100% responsibility for our lives. This is a very difficult thing to do, and no one does this overnight, so we have to be patient with ourselves. Being in the human experience, we have all had many painful, difficult experiences where it clearly looks like it is the other person's fault, or bad luck, or whatever else we want to call it. So taking responsibility for what appears to come to us through no fault of our own is no easy task, but it is well worth the effort, because when we take responsibility for what happens to us, we can then learn and grow from our experiences and make new choices for ourselves. This is not to say that there are things that happen to us that are not our fault. But once they happen, we can't make them unhappen. And the responsibility for our future is ours. So changing our attitude from blame to responsibility will change what happens next in our world. Sostice demands the courage to face the dark? What are we afraid to find lurking there? It is always easier to blame someone else. We hate most in others what we are afraid to see in ourselves. If we shout that someone else is a racist loud enough, perhaps no one will notice our own discomfort with these issues. Perhaps if we say that others are evil, we can ignore the same capacity within ourselves. What are we most afraid of? What are our darkest secrets? I want us each to consider these. Don't worry, there's no talk back after this sermon, so you won't be asked to expose these secrets. What struggles do you have to face? Maybe you have less patience with children than you thought you would. Maybe you are uncomfortable with your sexuality. Maybe we can't admit that we were wrong in that painful argument so many years ago. But winter also brings fear about material things. A couple weeks ago, it was very real. What if I lose power in my house? Will I freeze? Will the food in my refrigerator spoil? Will I starve? When we lose our electricity, we say that we have lost power. I have lost power. It's a frightening thing to say to yourself, especially when you take into account the deeper meaning of that. Think about what it means to lose your power. Solstice can remind us of our powerlessness. We all have these moments where we don't know what to do, don't know the right words to say, don't know sometimes even the right thing to think. That can feel pretty powerless. But the most powerless person is the one who is unable to admit that they are vulnerable. We are most powerless when we need help and we are afraid to ask. When we are in the dark, we think we are alone. We have to use our voices to call out and trust that someone will answer. But darkness is an invitation to self-knowledge. Do you like being alone with yourself? Do you like being alone with yourself? What is lurking inside you? There may be a skeleton in your closet or an undiscovered treasure. We should not let our fear of the dark prevent us from going there. Monsters are often less scary when we confront them. When we run from what frightens us, it leaves us defenseless and adds to our fear of the unknown. If we admit our weakness, our dark side, it is less likely to surprise us at the wrong time. We must eventually love the dark side of ourselves. Just as night cannot be separated from day, and as winter turns into spring, our weaknesses are often merely flip sides of our strength. If we are passionate about something, we risk being obsessive. If we are serious, we risk being joyless. If we are logical, we risk being emotionless. If we are compassionate, we risk being patronizing. If we are spontaneous, we risk being chaotic. If we are selfless, we risk losing ourselves. If we are strong, we risk being domineering. If we are agreeable, we risk being overpowered. Every good contains the bad, and the bad contains the good. It is impossible to avoid the dark. Eventually, everyone wakes up in the middle of the night. Do you like who you are when you are alone in the dark? Before you turn on the light, before you reach out for somebody nearby, before you call into the darkness, do you like who you are when you are alone in the dark? I tend to be extroverted. I want to shine like the sun, but I need the darkness to calm me inside and recharge. I could fight against the darkness and the cold and deny that it's a part of me, or I can choose to love it. I would love to have all the answers. Ministers love to pontificate. But I must learn to love my doubts, to cherish saying, I don't know. For the doubts will lead to better answers. I would like to be an endless source of compassion, but I'm not. I must love the part of me that needs to be cared for. Sostice reminds us that there are good things in the dark. There is stillness, an opportunity to listen. There is gestation, like a seed in the womb of the earth. There is restoration, like sleep. And we see things like stars, which are hidden by the light of day. And we see aspects of ourselves, which are hidden by the toil of day. Unitarian Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote that nature puts us to bed like a mother does a child. So nature deals with us and takes away our playthings one by one, and by the hand leads us to rest so gently that we go, scarcely knowing if we wish to go or stay, being too full of sleep to understand how far the unknown transcends what we know. The dark is often synonymous with the unknown. When confronted with the unknown, we are tempted to fill it with fear and be anxious about it, or fill it with hope and be disappointed by it. We need solstice to let the unknown be the unknown. We need to reconcile ourselves to the reality of how far the unknown transcends what we know. In order to do this, we need to be fearless this solstice season, knowing that the longest night journeys to the lengthening day, and there is much to learn along the way. May we bless and be blessed.